In parts 2 to 7, we learned how to describe line graphs, tables, pie charts, and bar charts with trends. But what if our graph doesn't show a trend? In other words, if there's no time moving forward, how would we describe that? If, for example, there's a bar chart which compares the average income in 3 different countries, country A, country B, and C, in 2000, and country A has a bar up here and the other bars are lower, we wouldn't use the same vocabulary for describing trends that we learnt in part 2. We would use words of comparison such as more than, less than, the most, the least, the highest, and so on to describe the information. So in the case of the average income of the 3 countries, we would say country A, the one with the highest bar, has the highest average income, while country B has slightly less, and country C has the least of all the 3 countries. So let's look at how to summarize the information on graphs without trends. Look at this example. It shows how many hours of free time men and women of 5 different employment groups enjoyed in a specific week. You can see there's no trend, there's no time moving forward. So we cannot talk about an increase or a decrease. We are now going to compare the amount of free time men and women in each of these groups down here had. Looking at the bars, what do you think would be a good elephant sentence? What stands out about the amount of time people in these 5 groups had? Isn't it clear that the 2 middle bars are by far the highest? That means that people in those groups had the most free time in a week. So let's look at the model answer together. Here's our graph again at the top of the page. And here's our introduction. The bar chart gives information about how much leisure time men and women of 5 different employment categories enjoyed in a specific week from 1998 to 1999. In other words, the week was during that period. That doesn't mean it's a trend. So that's our introduction. You see, we've used all the 5 pieces of information. Now we go to the elephant sentence. The first thing to note is that unemployed and retired men and women had the most free time in a week. So you can see it summarized the fact that these 2 groups in the middle, unemployed and retired men and women, had the most free time. Remember, that was our elephant sentence. That's what stood out. Now we come to the main body. More specifically, unemployed and retired men had around 83 hours of leisure time during a week. So we put unemployed and retired men together because they're very, very similar, aren't they? While women in the same categories had about 10 hours less. Look at that, about 10 hours less. So you see, we're finished with those 2 categories all in one sentence. We've put all the data and we have summarized the information. Now we go to the next paragraph. Men and women who worked full-time had approximately 45 hours and 38 hours respectively. So again, in one sentence, I've talked about these 2 groups here, men and women who worked full hours, and I connected them with the word respectively. So I show that I can summarize. Housewives and women who worked part-time had about 50 hours and 40 hours accordingly. So that's these 2 groups here. We put them together, but there's no information for men in these categories. So very often you will see a table, for example, with some information missing. That does not mean that, men had no, in this case, men had no free time, or housewives, or there were no house husbands. That simply means that, maybe they were not part of the research, or there's no information given for men in those categories. So even though it doesn't say anything, that means there's no information. Now, of course, we summarize with our conclusion. From the given data, it is obvious that, generally speaking, men enjoyed more free time during a week than women. So we've summarized all the information we mentioned above, and we just check. We have our introduction, the elephant sentence, the main body, with all the categories, with all the data. We have left nothing out. And then we summarize the information so we know we have completed this task 1. Here are some pie charts. Do they show a trend? There's no time, is there, from one pie chart to another? But what is this about? Here, these two pie charts compare the percentage of boys and girls that spent their time on various activities, and these are the activities in the pie charts. So what do you notice? In other words, what would be a good pie chart, a good elephant sentence for this? Do they enjoy the same activities? Well, not really, do they? There's some similar, but there are some different activities. So you have to summarize the differences and the similarities between the activities of boys and girls in their free time. So try this one yourselves and check your answer in the ebook.